Skyrim is a game that needs no introduction. If you've so much as seen a video game before, you've heard of Skyrim. The Mount Rushmore of gaming is Mario, Master Chief, Kratos, and Scandinavian Man. One of the main contributors of this game's success is that it just so happens to be available on every platform ever made. These platforms include PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, Nintendo Switch, Windows, Amazon Alexa. Basically every somewhat modern console except the Wii U. Sorry guys. With all these different versions of the game out there, it can be kind of intimidating to find the right version for you. I wish I could tell you all these versions were faithful interpretations of this classic game, but I'd be lying. There's one version of the game that's absolutely plagued with bugs and glitches. Well, more so than the regular game. And can even end up corrupting your game files and making you lose potentially hundreds of hours of progression. This version is Skyrim on the PlayStation 3. Now before we get to the port itself, we need to talk about the actual console. Also, if I see anyone starting console war arguments in the comments, I will go to your house and beat you. So the PlayStation 3 launched back in late 2006, and the launch was pretty rough.
The stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan. So here's this giant enemy crab.
Whether it was the outrageous price point, the lackluster launch lineup, or the weird f***ing baby commercials, the PlayStation 3 was initially considered a commercial disappointment. This continued on for the first couple of years of the console's lifespan. When it came to third-party games, the PlayStation also suffered compared to the 360. See, the PlayStation 3 had very unorthodox software architecture. I'm not going to pretend that I understand how these gamer boxes work, but from what I could gather, the CPU was designed in an absolutely bat-shit insane way. This made it technically more powerful than 360, but much more difficult to develop for. Due to this, most third-party companies would develop their games for 360 first, then port them over to PlayStation, usually poorly at that. It's the reason why first-party titles like Killzone or Metal Gear Solid 4 look so good, but third-party games kinda look bad. So the majority of the time, if you're playing a multi-platform game like GTA 4 or Modern Warfare 2, the PlayStation 3 version ran much worse than its Xbox counterpart. And that brings us to this piece of shit. Now's a good time to bring up my history with this abomination of a port. Back in 2012, all I had was a PlayStation 3, but I would be damned if that would stop me from playing Skyrim. And play it I did. A lot. Alarming amount to be specific. I did not have any friends. So I personally have a lot of time spent with this version. And is it really that bad? Let's start with the frame rate.
Oh! What the f—
Yeah, the frame rate is awful. No, I'm not a frame rate snob that'll laugh at anything below 120 FPS, but this is just unbearable. I've seen PowerPoint presentations that move more smoothly than this game. And this is just out in the middle of nowhere. If you go somewhere large like Castle Volkihar, it would be faster to grab a pen and paper and draw the next frame. Now the frame rate on Xbox wasn't crazy or anything, but it's a pretty solid 30 with the occasional dip here and there. Now let's be real for a second. This is a console game from 2011. If the frame rate was the only issue, yeah, it would suck, but it wasn't uncommon at the time. However, I think you and I both know that this isn't the case. Loading screens. If you've played Skyrim, you're familiar with these. You get a loading screen whenever you fast travel, walk through a door, or have a heart attack. Kids today have been spoiled with their high-end SSDs and short to non-existent loading screens. Here, loading screens can take anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. That is, if they don't outright crash your game. Now 15 to 30 seconds might not sound like a long time, and I agree to a certain extent, but you'll spend so much of your time looking at these fucking chickens. You're going to be constantly fast traveling or going through load zones, so these load times are just going to drag on and on. I could literally sit and get halfway through an H-Bomber Guy video before I load into the game.
Liberty Prime is a gigantic fucking robot! You have a bunch of opportunities to see it.
The other platforms at the time weren't a whole lot better, but the PlayStation 3 version was noticeably slower. Let's address the elephant in the room. The game looks like shit. Now Skyrim was and is a pretty good looking game. Sure, character models can get a little wonky at times, but the game still holds up pretty well. Except on PlayStation 3. It runs at 720p, which isn't a deal breaker necessarily, but it just hasn't aged the best. There is a noticeable lack of polish compared to other versions of the game. Textures here just look blurry and muddy. Also, the water in this version is just awful. It truly garbage. Now, all of these issues I mentioned above might come off as non-issues and nitpicky, and that might be true, but luckily, I've saved the biggest issue for last. Skyrim on PlayStation 3 has one of the most mind-boggling bugs I've ever seen in my life. They could not have made a worse bug if they wanted to. If you play the game for too long, the game world will melt around you. While playing the game, if your save file gets above 5 megabytes, the game commits
no longer being alive.
Apparently when it goes past 5 megabytes, the game starts to pull from the console's hard drive and it all goes to shit. All of those issues I mentioned above are increased tenfold. You thought 20 FPS was bad? How about 5? 15 seconds too long for loading screens? Try 2 minutes. You think this looks ugly? Just for a moment, I want to stop and reinforce just how horrible this is. A game that's designed to be played for hundreds of hours, yet if your save file gets too big, the game gets nuked. If I got tossed in a time machine and had to go back in time, break into Bethesda's HQ, and sabotage the PS3 port of Skyrim, I wouldn't be able to do as good of a job as these goofballs did. And let's keep in mind, 5 megabytes is nothing. That'll translate roughly to about 10 to 20 hours of gameplay. If you've played Skyrim, you know how laughable that number is. So as you play, you just watch the world around you slowly crumble. Also, the game can just outright brick your console. Like, that's it. Buy an Xbox, loser. Now this is a version I grew up with, and while thankfully my console didn't burn my house to the ground, my game suffered a less than fortunate fate. Now I obviously don't have any footage from back then because I was an actual child, but I was able to put together an accurate representation of what I saw. But really, my first character was a Khajiit one-handed warrior, and I got to about level 40-ish before my game decided to shit the bed. I remember I'd abandoned my save in Solitude, right outside Castle Door. The game ran at single-digit frame rate, and every time I tried to fast travel or do literally anything, my console would reset, which, looking back, probably wasn't a good sign. Let me tell you though, I was distraught. I sunk all this time and effort into this game that I couldn't even finish without setting off a tactical nuke in my living room. Oh well though, now I could play much more stable games on the PlayStation 3, like Fallout New Vegas. So, should you play the PlayStation 3 version of Skyrim? No, what the fuck? Have you not been paying attention the whole entire video? Are you stupid? If you have literally any other way to play this game, go that route instead. Even the Nintendo Switch version runs better in handheld mode, and it won't blow up in your hands, so there's a plus. Even though this port is horrible, I can't help but have a certain amount of nostalgia for it. Skyrim was one of the first games I really got hyped for, and I actively followed development on it. Despite all my issues with it, I still put a lot of time in on it, and I can't bring myself to outright hate it. So if you really want to play the game and don't own any of these, I guess the PlayStation 3 version will be fine. But if you are going to play it, here's how to make it less painful. Number 1, turn off autosaves. These will get your save files fatter than an r/Fallout New Vegas mod, so ditch them. 2, keep saves to a minimum. I'd keep a max of 4 at all times, preferably 2 or 3. Lastly, drive to your nearest garage sale and buy a PS4, please. I'm trying to save you some heartache. Learn from my mistakes, people. Alright, so did any of you guys play the PlayStation 3 version of Skyrim, or am I alone in my suffering? Whatever it is, let me know down below. If you liked the video, liking and subscribing really helps the channel out a lot. I post videos just like this a couple times a month, so be sure to turn the bell on so you don't miss any. We do have a channel Discord that you can join to the link below. Also, big shout out to all of our channel members. If membership is something you're interested in, click the join button down below. I think that's all for me. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.